Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Stampscaping 101. This is a scene that was stamped out without the trees in my stamp sketching video based on the shore set. These don't all come in a set, or they're all in a set, but they're all sold individually as well. But anyways, this is the shore set, and what I did was I bolstered up the composition with a couple different trees in here, putting it behind the cabin and on each one of these shores right around in here. And I use my tree dough here to kind of fill it out a little bit more. I used those two components on my last scene. I just happened to have them on my desk, so I used them on this one. But one of the things about this scene is I wanted to experiment around with some ink applications in the form of the alcohol inks. Not as an embellishment to dye-based inks, but kind of used as the main coloring medium throughout the scene here. So I went through a lot of different colors, and I have a lot of different values of each color to use these days with my I'm not going to grab my Shuttle. It's a gigantic set of 80 pens that I bought for $40, so there's all kinds of different variations of every given hue, from very light to your darker tones. I stuck around with mostly my lighter tones, and I worked into the darker ones. These aren't only the only ones that I used. I used a ton of them. I just grabbed anything that I had, and I also have two sets of Plume pens. These are more of a brush marker ones. These are single-sided though, but between these different sets, I had, a vast range of values of every given hue that has been used in here, from browns, oranges and reds, greens and blues. Okay, so a lot of experimentation here. I'm a beginner at using kind of pens just to color an entire scene completely. And my process is going through a lot of lighter tones, blending them in, working into the darker tones, and going back to the lighter ones, adding more darker tones, then going back to the lighter ones, and just trying to mix things, how alcohol inks kind of build up on the surface of paper. And this is a glossy cardstock right here, so it does absorb into the paper a little bit, but a lot of that ink does stay on the surface, so I'm able to manipulate it a little bit more and move it around, and sometimes even lift off colors that have already been laid down. Not 100%, but some. And then using a lot of the gel pens to go in and add some nice color embellishments in here, for some details, highlighting, and just overall kind of a nice textural formation creations, if you want to call it that, using gel pens. And the gel pens also come in a vast array of different values, like in the Shuttle art. I don't have any affiliation with Shuttle art. I just bought these, and there's tons of different brands out there I found. But this one was 180 colors for $25, so there's a vast array of different values to choose from. And since I'm using a vast array of colors in here, then I thought I would follow up doing so with gel pens here. So, and those worked out really good in terms of the application of some lighter tones and darker tones in the form of a dot, but I can also do it in color dots, and it kind of makes each one of these little areas in here, as well as the grass down here, kind of shimmer a little bit more. It's kind of a way to add in an element of light to an otherwise kind of darker area where color has been applied, in this case with alcohol inks. And then overall, I applied my Hero Arts, or just whatever, you can do it with whatever white pigment ink that you happen to use, and to just add in the kind of that foggy kind of mist over everything to kind of mellow out some areas that were a little bit too bright for me, and maybe too crisp on the overall, so I wanted the crisp in conjunction with some softer areas. And that's what that type of ink application results in if you use it in a very thin, very kind of dry brush approach, okay? Not big balls of, white paint everywhere, okay? So it's very translucent and kind of airy. All right, so kind of a fun experiment. I'll have to use some of these things again and experiment more with pens and kind of get my, I don't know, feel of those down better, where I can kind of manipulate, textures a little bit easier. And I like what happened in the water down here. It looks kind of like almost a watercolory type of look. I won't insult watercolorists by saying a watercolor look, because it isn't, and I'm not good at it, but I just kind of stayed with these little, kind of formations that happen, when you apply alcohol inks on a piece of paper that, they can kind of puddle a little bit and have kind of a darker edge. So I kind of stuck with that and kind of built on that aspect of the medium. So anyways, hope you enjoy the video if you choose to watch it, and thanks as always for tuning into the channel. Okay, I thought I would try and finish this scene right here in terms of some color, but let's experiment a little bit with just some, I don't know, a different technique. But let's build this up a little bit so that we have a few more options, okay? I was just using this maple pear stamp in the last video, and I thought I would add some of these trees into the scene. And I'll just be stamping it behind my cabin, so what I've done is I've just masked off my cabin like that. With a ripped paper towel, that's all that's really needed there. So you can make these kind of locations specific to, a given type of location, depending on what type of foliage you put in the scene. So that's why there's no existing trees. I've just kind of masked off some areas right here. So here's some bushes down here, as opposed to a full-grown tree with the trunks right there. I can put some up here using the full trunks, or I can just, I don't know, I can mask some of this off and just use the foliage portion. Let's see, let's retain that slope right there on that, and have the trees on the other side of the slope, like that. I could build up some more if I want to as well in the foreground, so something like that. So it kind of takes on a little bit of a different spirit depending on what type of tree you use. If I used pines in here, it would look a little bit different, or I could use intersperse some pines and have both spines and deciduous trees in here. And that would be nice too. Okay, let's get some of this in the foreground a little bit. I'll have some of that near shoreline kind of showing through these trees, but that's alright. I'll use some extra color in here, and we'll see what we can do about blending all of that together. Okay, so let's just do that. This is the tree that I used in the last scene. If you're watching any of these videos in sequence, you'll be familiar with these two stamps I used in conjunction with one another from that scene. Kind of just masking off the trunks here. Again, let's mask off the whole tree here and put the pines here behind the deciduous. And how about masking this off like so and putting the pines in front of this deciduous tree as well. So we're kind of sandwiching and layering this scene. And is masking needed? Yeah, but it's just this used for, all of my masking. Quite easy. And it doesn't have to be, super... it doesn't have to be super careful of a process, in terms of having that mask perfectly configured to the shape of the object that you're masking off. Okay? Because we do have a lot of overlap occurring. In this type of stamping, it's just not necessary and might even be detrimental to the overall appearance of your scene by having things masked off too carefully, because you want everything to merge together, so inevitably you're going to have things overlapping one another, which helps with the blending and the continuity of a, kind of a, or maybe not the continuity, but the cohesion of the scene. Okay, so filling this in, and then the scene looks a lot more full, doesn't it? And that's what this set is really all about. It's about, I mean, you can have it just bare as is, but the ability to go in here and add this extra foliage really kind of completes the look, and it makes it look more full. I mean, you could even put palm trees into this thing, the foundation, if you wanted to. Okay, let's take a look here. Alright, now one of the things I was thinking about doing was just playing around with some different media on here. You've seen me blend in a lot of dye-based inks, and I really love doing that, but we do have a lot of things like alcohol inks and pens and gel pens and colored pencils that might be fun to play around with. I haven't done a lot of that. I haven't done a lot of exclusive types of applications using those using that media as the main kind of I don't know, coloring medium in a scene. I've used them as kind of embellishments to dye-based inks, in other words. So let's take a look here. What's going through my head is, there's all kinds of colors we can bring into things like deciduous trees. You can do them in greens for the spring. You can move them into kind of fall color for the fall. Things like autumn brown, greens, oranges, reds, etc. And I'm trying to think right now of what I want to do. I'm thinking about taking it into the autumn kind of direction. So what I'm doing right here is I'm seeing what pens I have kind of in that spirit. So let's pull some of these out. Pink. Boy, that is a really light green, pale green right there. So that's what these pens look like right here. I'm starting, with some very light ones, because I don't want to go into it too crazy. No, I'm just pulling these in. I don't know if I'm going to use them all. Alright. But let's pull out some greens, too, for my grassy area. These are all, I have a set of the Plumes and a set of the Shuttle art ones, okay? So, we have quite a few to choose from right here. Let's take a look here. Alright, let me zoom out of this. And let's try for a little experiment here, okay? Alright. Let's add some of this. What color is this? Pastel peach. Into this tree grouping here. Kind of not doing it over everything. I'm just kind of applying the same concept that I try to do with the dye-based inks. One of the nice things about alcohol inks, of course, is the binder is different than dye-based. It's that it's not using water, so it's not, smearing my imagery that I've just stamped out. If you do it in a VersaFine or something like that, where the ink is really still sitting on the surface of the paper, it would probably make it smear. So I don't know. I would probably suggest a dye-based ink. There's other type that, there's like StazOn and things like that too. But for here, I'm just going to use the dye-based inks. Okay, so we have those trees going on in there. I have a feeling that I'll be using some of this color in other areas as well, but we'll see. Just for continuity, so I'm not stamping one thing one color, another thing a completely different set of colors, without having some kind of universal tone in there. Okay, let me take a look at this. This one's called Camel. A little darker, and let's apply that kind of in a similar types of location as the other one. Maybe I'll do a little bit less. This isn't the fall color that I'm looking for, but I just want to go for a little bit more of like a earthy base, and then I'll bring some kind of stronger, more bold color choices in later, after I get a little bit of this down. I'm kind of doing this in the same process as I do with the dye-based inks in terms of getting kind of a light shade down first. It gives me kind of a better idea of the direction something might go in. Okay, let's see. This one's just called Orange. Okay. Starting to move pretty bright here and darker, okay. Really bright. Kind of getting a spattering of that down. Kind of crazy with that one. Alright, let's go back to the camel and kind of blend that in. The color does kind of get set, but as long as you kind of hit it with another color before it kind of sets up too completely, it does move around quite a bit. By the way, this is just the glossy that I work with dye-based inks. Okay, so getting that kind of established. So that was probably a good idea to get that foundation going with those other lighter tones too, because it, kind of, I wouldn't say it sealed off the scene, but it kind of got a little bit of foundation, so probably those brighter orange is sitting on the surface a little bit more than it would have had it just been drawn, directly onto the bare paper. I'm not sure. It's just what I'm speculating. Okay. Alright, let's try a pink here. A pale red would be pink, right? So let's try to add some of this in here. Okay, before I go to something like a red. It's kind of, going on now, kind of in the spirit that I want. I didn't want something too bright right off the bat, at least. But we'll see where this goes. I don't know. Okay, now let's try the red. Here's a tomato red. And this method here makes me think about kind of like adult coloring books or something like that. The kind of the popularity of that, I don't know, whatever pastime, past 10 years or so. And luckily that exists because we wouldn't have all these very inexpensive pens to choose from had it not been for that, you know, that hobby that popped up where, you know, you have these alcohol inks sets, you know, for extremely reasonable prices. The Plumes are a little bit more with this brush marker tip, but the Shuttle art pens are, you know, roughly about 50 cents each. And I bought a set of 80 colors, so quite a nice range, you know, and kind of moves into the warm and cool grays, you know, having a nice range of that. Okay, so these trees are getting that little kind of bit of variation that I sought and seek when doing these types of kind of objects like this. Certainly bright in terms of the intensity, you know, in relation to you know, what I'm usually doing. Okay, let's see. Yeah, a little bit dark. Let's see if I have a lighter. Okay, here's my very light biscuit. This is called. It's a very light tone again. Okay. And let's just color in my entire cabin pile of wood here. Let's go with the pier here too. Alright, and let's bring this into these shores left and right. Actually, that's just shore left. This is shore with cabin, so it's part of the design. Okay, kind of hitting this around. You can see where there's darker areas on the design. I'm just kind of going in there and reiterating that. And I'm leaving a little bit just white. Okay. I have to be careful because as I come into those trees, it's kind of blending out those trees, and I'm getting some red in here, which is fine. You know, it's good. You know, it's good to have some colors kind of blending out into the surrounding area too. So. Okay, and there's the near shore. Okay. Here's a pale green. Let's try some of that. It wouldn't be bad to have a little bit of that green in the trees too, so not all the, you know, the leaves are turned yet. Maybe. I don't see any of that green showing up in the trees. Maybe it's already kind of set. Okay, let's add some of this green to the shoreline. It's just a very pale green right here. It's one of the really nice things about these pens is you can have kind of an endless array of values of whatever given hue you want. Okay, so there's really pale blues, pale browns, oranges, etc. in these types of pen sets. Okay, do you see that green in there? It's just a tinge of it right now. Not very bold at all. Now this is called pale green in the Shuttle art lineup. Okay, that was melon before. I'm looking at my pens. I'd like to have one that's a little bit not quite so bright as this one. But let's just bring it in. Actually, it looks okay. I'm kind of just adding this in the shadows right now. Okay. Okay, let me go back to that melon, okay? And let's blend that out a little bit. I might use some more of that kind of brighter green, but I just wanted to hit that with kind of a lighter one to blend it out before it got, potentially set up, and I couldn't move it with the lighter tone here. So let's go back in here. Okay. And see, I'm just, like I said, I'm just kind of hitting those areas where there's, black on the design itself. So oftentimes, the brighter things are in the shadows, the brighter colors, okay? Because, the sunlight kind of washes out colors and makes it, not as bright. It makes it more dull. So, like a overcast day, it's quite oftentimes, the colors are much brighter. You're taking pictures or looking at, your flowers in your garden or something like that. High noon, the colors might not be as bright as overcast or like a rainy day or something. Okay, so see, like at the base of the tree, I put, some of that brighter tone. We'll try with some darker greens as well. Alright, what is this? Spearmint, let's take a look. Okay, not too bright of color. It's almost like another blending. It's a little bit duller, okay, of color. But darker though. Darker than some colors, so we can layer that. My paper is starting to get a little bit sticky from the use of the alcohol inks. Oh, let's try it up here in the trees as well. Get a little touch here and there. Overlapping, alcohol inks are going to be transparent, so it's not going to look like straight green when I put that up there, but hopefully we'll get a little tinge of that hue in the given areas that I'm adding it to. I think it just makes it a little bit more kind of earthy looking, and won't have that stark brightness, that I don't really want. At least right now, I don't want it right now in those trees. Now, if this whole scene gets brighter and brighter and brighter, or elements, all the different aspects of it are bright, then it'll match the brightness of those trees a touch. But right now, it stands out too much. Okay, here's a little bit more green here. That's pretty bright. Okay, so kind of just adding a little spattering of it here and there. I see it as almost like adding kind of a drop of some water-soluble ink or something like that and going back into it with water. Only in this case it's alcohol, so it's like adding some alcohol-soluble ink, and then I'm going to hit it with, you know, a lighter shade of that given hue, and that'll kind of reconstitute that little drop of ink, hopefully, you know, before it kind of sets up. Okay. If you have a blender pen, you can use the blender pen too, but I think just using a lighter version of your given area works great. And, well, I don't know. Maybe if you have a $5 pen, you don't want to do that. I've never had a problem going into lights from a dark. I just do my little, you know, drag, and I don't think my lighter colors, my lighter values are infected by the darker ones, okay? So that's never really been a concern of mine. That goes for dye-based ink pens as well. I spent years just kind of doing coloring for a stamp of the hand and these boards that they used to have copied off, and I don't know, the pens never suffered as a result of kind of the intermingling of values within a given color scheme, so just a little wipe off and that'll do it. Okay, but see, this is kind of starting to develop a little bit more. The intensity of the green spots are, you know, kind of getting up to that red a little bit. Alright, this is the darker green. It's almost like a Christmas green or something of that sort. Hitting it into my shadow areas like so. Where I think, you know, there would be a kind of stronger shadow. Maybe not everywhere, but kind of underneath that pier. Little spots here and there, maybe. Alright, let's kind of go back and blend that out. You can really see the kind of the this dark green really kind of disappearing as I kind of lift it, you know, with this lighter green, you know, just because this darker green has the most contrast, and probably it's also starting to get a buildup, so, you know, when it goes back into solution, it's really, you know, easily manipulated in terms of kind of blending it out, because that ink is probably really a lot more surface oriented than the first few layers that I put down that were getting absorbed into the pulp of the paper. That's what I'm guessing. And I would guess that is the case because, you know, as I do this, you know, if you've used alcohol inks before, you know that kind of sticky kind of residue that remains. Okay, you can go for a little bit of texture too. This is grass. Maybe I'll kind of, as I do this, I'm not necessarily making these grassy points as much as I might be removing ink in a darker region, kind of leaving kind of the reverse mark of these little hatch marks. You know, it might be lighter. But that's one of the things about using these pens, you know, or other types of media. You can probably achieve some different types of textures than you can with, say, you know, dye-based inks applied with a sponge or something. Okay, I don't want my chisel tip. These are double-sided. The Marvys are just single-sided. Okay, now this whole process that I'm kind of going through right now. This will be the process that I use through this whole I don't know, coloring process. I'm going to be trying to get a transition of hue in a given area. Well, let's see how that goes. I mean, like I said, I haven't done this before. At least not to this extent. I've used a lot of dye-based inks in other scenarios, you know, other usages, but not quite so extensively. So we'll see how it turns out. If you like it, try it. If you hate it, well, maybe try it and just do a better job than I do. Okay, here comes that, or apricot. I don't remember if I used that. This area down here in the white, I'm going to add that. Let's add this on the cabin as well. Let's layer the cabin, little pile of wood there. Let's get some little strokes across these wood panels on the cabin, beams, logs, whatever. It's not really a log cabin, but maybe there are log elements within it. Okay, so you see that kind of a little bit more of earthy tone in there. So it's not just going just for straight green. Usually in grassy areas, I don't like just straight green. It looks, it doesn't look quite so natural to me. Okay, this is salmon pink. Let's try that in here as well. So salmon pink can go into both areas, both wood and grass. How about the pier as well? Okay, hitting this tree. I don't know, some of that red was a little bit too crazy, so it's going back into solution just fine, and it's kind of lifting in some areas. Not completely, it's not like an eraser or something like that, but yeah, you can do that thing where you're kind of laying that down, and you can see that kind of that alcohol ink kind of separating a little bit. I use that for a given effect. Back when I was in school, I happened to buy a set of markers. Markers were kind of more the tool of the design student more than the illustration student. Design students use those markers like Add and Chartback, I think, and they were really smelly, you know, xylene-based pens. And I didn't like that. It was just so strong. I don't know. I like it sometimes. I always like some, but maybe not that strong. And I don't know. So there was a set of pens called all right, I already forgot what it's. They were called. I'll tell you in a minute. I still have my set here. They're all dry, but I got those. They were alcohol-based pens, and most pens weren't at the time. And I don't know. They worked just fine for me, but they did have that kind of that separation type of issue going on with them. Okay, now this is sepia. Okay, I'm just adding this. See, instead of just coloring this whole cabin right here, I'm hitting some areas in here that kind of might be more in the shadows. There's a pile of wood here. I could kind of add some of this down as well to those areas. Okay, even the vertical side of the cabin, and especially under the eaves, I can color in like so. Okay, so it looks a little more three-dimensional when you have these planes right here that represent something flat in the vertical side. Okay. Alright, let's get some of this into this pier as well. Maybe don't do the whole pier. I think it looks better if you kind of vary it a little bit, like so, okay? Put some of this down my grass for shadows. Bring some of this brown into, how about into some of this grass area right in here? It doesn't read as brown, but you get a little bit of a flavor of that brown in those areas. Again, for that kind of a continuity between different color schemes within the composition. So there's the brown over there, and you have a little bit of brown over here. You know what I mean? It's just, it brings a little bit of cohesion to the overall instead of having a bunch of things colored completely separately from one another. Which maybe you do for, I don't know, some other effect, you know, some purpose, but for me I like to kind of mix it up. Alright, now I have this vast area of water. I've kind of been avoiding that right now because I'm kind of going through in my mind how I'm going to approach that. Because there is so much space. Alright, this is a brownish gray. Let's get a little bit of this in this roof top. I'll go kind of with the direction of the wooden roof, okay. Put some of this on this. Bring it down to my grass again, okay. Put some up in my trees. Okay, adding a little bit more of this brightness back into this area. It's kind of getting even easier to manipulate, you know, the more that this ink is kind of built up. I'm finding I can go for that kind of watercolory look, you know, with that ink separation type of thing going on. It's kind of nice to be able to kind of manipulate it. Can add a little bit more green into those trees. If I just kind of stick with it a little bit longer, it does lift remarkably well. Kind of more than I thought it would do. Actually, I can remove almost all the ink I'm finding if I just kind of stay in that area and kind of work it around. I mean, I doubt if I can take like a blender pen and take it back to white or something like that, but there's a remarkable amount of lift kind of taking place in these areas. See, I'm kind of getting some of this green right into that area if I want to, just by sticking with it a little bit longer, like so. Actually, that looks really good. See that little green up there? I wanted a little bit more cohesion. Okay, you know, just all that green. We needed something up in those trees. I thought. I didn't know if it would happen, but see that? As I do this, it's getting lighter and lighter into the red, and there goes that little bit of green right there. So, you learn something new every year. I know it's supposed to be every day. That was a joke. Okay. Let's try... I haven't been yelling out these colors, but I don't know. Here's a pastel yellow here. Let's give it a try. Let's bring some of it. I don't want it yellow, but I don't know. It's just kind of bringing in this lighter element, using it as a... kind of a color lifter. So it's kind of getting lighter in there. It's almost like an eraser. Kind of interesting. Interesting for me. You guys might have been doing this all, all of these things all along. It's new kind of for me. But it kind of is bringing back some different things that I seem to recall doing on some of my assignments. My illustration teacher hated it. I handed in a project that we were using a lot of my pens. So we were mostly using gouache and paintings. And it was the only thing that I really did. It was this whole alphabet set. No one knew what we were supposed to be doing. Everyone's projects look terrible. But anyways, I'm adding this yellow in here. It's kind of bringing it to life a little bit, maybe. I don't know. Okay, let's see. Here's that bright yellow again. I mean, green, apple green. It's kind of going back in now into those areas that were maybe too canary yellow, and just kind of blending them out again. It's just, I don't know. This isn't like a, like a lesson on pens. This is just not what I'm kind of figuring out. For me, working on this scene here, there's probably much better ways and videos out there to learn how to use your pens kind of in an effective manner. Here's a couple grays right here. Alright, I'm just going in for some of these little rocks in here. This is a really light gray. It's a cool gray number 3, it says. Are they somewhat universal in terms of the values and their naming convention with other sets? I don't know. It's a very pale or light gray. Okay, so I've got that gray down there on those rocks. Now let's go in with a darker gray. Oh, here's a cool gray number 3. Let me see if it's... I think it's darker, probably. Or is it? I don't know. Maybe it is. Well, it's a little bit darker than that other one. This is the Shuttle art one. The Shuttle art gray is it's darker than the Marvy gray. Of course, they're different grays. One's probably neutral, and this one says cool. Although this one seems a little bit neutral to me, too. It doesn't seem to have too much of a temperature in it. Okay, adding some of these to these rocks around in here.
Okay. Let's pick out some blue tones. Maybe not all blue, maybe I'll go with, some grays as well. I'm not sure. I just organized my desk recently, and it's kind of nice. I had some alcohol pens on the left side, some on the right side, just depending on when I bought them. It's kind of nice having things kind of a little bit more grouped in kind of a way that makes sense. I should do that more often. I don't know if I will, though. Organizing, I'm saying. Okay, cool gray.
you know, just the cool gray again. Be nice to kind of have more of a kind of a neutral gray, maybe. I'm not sure. There's a blue gray. Okay, I'm trying to figure out some hue, okay, that I can use. Maybe something like that would be a good one to start off with. Okay, now we have a really large space in here to fill in. All right, so I don't know exactly how to. This would be a good, maybe a location just to fill it in with some dye-based inks, but I'm kind of determined to just go with the, you know, a non-dye-based application area. All right, now I'm dragging in some color from my trees here, so I got a little peach hue drag right there, but I don't know, that doesn't look too bad. I was thinking about bringing in some warm tones in here anyway. But here's what I'm going to do. I'll color this. Well, this color right here, this pale blue, is really blue. It's like a, I don't even know if it's a 5%. It is so light. But I'll get a little of this color going in here first, okay? And with my darker colors, I'll retain some of the lightness of this cool gray, pale blue foundation. Okay, so this whole area is basically filled in. I'm even just going over these rocks and everything in here. Let's go around like kayaker. Alright, on video, I bet you can't tell what I did at all. I don't know. Okay, so let me find the next lightest value, okay? Maybe the cool gray. This is cool gray 0.5, so I guess it's not even a cool gray 1. Yeah, it's really, really light. Okay, maybe this is an instance where maybe I'll use this chisel tip right here. Okay, it is just a touch darker than the previous blue. Alright, now I am really adding this. There's quite a lot of ink. I don't think I've used this chisel tip before, so it's very wide, but it's really releasing a ton of ink on here. So in my mind, that's kind of good. It's giving me that kind of that watercolory look, in terms of the slathering of alcohol ink and how it can potentially separate. Maybe I can, not being a painter, kind of get that kind of that separation to work in my favor. I don't know. A watercolorist would do, or a painter, someone that was really good at painting would do much better with this than I. Okay, but see what this is what I'm going. This is what's kind of happening. Can you see those kind of striations in there? I'm going to leave it as is. I did draw it in there, but it was far from kind of expertly directed. It's just kind of going where it wants to go. But what I'm doing is I'm just trying to let it kind of do what it's going to do. And to not fuss over it too much, so that it looks a little bit more graceful, I would say. I was going to say natural, but it's not really natural. It's just trying to let it kind of do its own thing. Okay, I'm really building some of it up and going for some additional layers. So, the name of the game is, as far as what I'm going for at least, is kind of variation. And I guess pattern and texture in a way. Something like that, right? It doesn't. It's not in the hue that I inevitably wanted, but that kind of gives me a starting point. It doesn't look bad though. I was thinking more blues, and I will bring that into it. Okay, here's that pale blue again. So maybe I'll. Yeah, the pale blue is a little bit too light. It's just lifting the colors I can see. Let's see what this blue-gray looks like. Okay. Let's still go into the kind of the darker areas maybe, and build that up and build up a little bit of ink in there. Come up here, bring that blue tinge. Alright, this is blue, but, or, what was it? Blue-gray. This is blue-gray 3, okay? So I take it the 3s are still pretty light. But I'm going to bring some of this into my grass just so it's not solely a water-based hue, okay? I'm trying to go along in the spirit of that, kind of the, those, kind of the, not striations, but, I don't know, that patterning from that first one, so that it looks a little bit more, maybe, designed by just reiterating those kind of those motions, you know, that have kind of formed from that first color. Okay, it's looking a little bit more too textured for me now, but we can blend those out, right? You know, using those lighter pens. Okay, so this is what it's kind of looking like in there. I like what the patterning that's being achieved in there, but we still need some kind of more, I don't know, some more perky tones in there. It doesn't have to be so light, but it needs to, in some areas, at least match a little bit of what's going on in other areas. So let's kind of hit it in the shadows. No, that's really bright, but we need to bring a little bit of this somewhere. Okay, so again, remember, in the shadows, sometimes, you know, are the brightest of colors. This one is so bright, I don't know. I mean, you can bring it a little bit in some areas that, you know, where it's not going to be so obvious that it's that color used, but if you want to bring in a little bit of this color to your other areas for that kind of continuity aspect, go ahead and do so. Okay, here's right along this boat. You can see the shadow of that character and the hull of the boat itself. Okay, adding some of this around the shadows of these rocks. Okay. I think I can use a little bit more of that, but this is baby blue. Shuttle art, baby blue. It's a little bit different. It's a little bit less. I don't know, crystal-y blue. I think the other one was a little bit of a warmer blue too. This was a little bit less so. Okay, let me. I need an intermediate between these two to feel real comfortable at applying it. Let me see what I have here. Okay, let's go back in with this one. Oh no, I haven't used the aquamarine. Okay, perfect. That aquamarine. Well, that's still really light, but I want to get a little bit more of this blue hue. Okay, maybe that aquamarine's really good. Actually. Okay, now I'm dragging some of this other color, these other really bright colors, you know, into it, you know, as they go back into solution. They're not going back into solution too much, okay, because I don't have a big slathering of them down. Well, actually, these ones are going back. Maybe I used a little bit more of those grays up there. So just kind of pull them, you know, into the scene a little bit more, maybe. As I kind of go over them too, it kind of gets on the brush, and then I'm dragging that color in a little bit more. So it's kind of, you know, I don't know, glowing maybe a little bit, just because of the variation in hue. I think I can use a little bit more of that in there too. Now let's try the azure. Let's come down here. Yeah, okay, that looks fairly subtle. I want more of that hue in there, that blue hue, I think. Let's come up here as well. Okay, and every time I kind of introduce a new color, it's not a bad idea to kind of blend that in a little bit, you know, with your lightest value of that given hue, the hue of that given space or whatever. Alright, now, I think I could use a little bit of warmth in a couple different areas. Okay, let's see. Yeah, it's too dark. I need like a really warm, really pale color. Pastel peach. Yeah, it's a little bit. Let me go in this rooftop here, and my wood in here is looking kind of anemic. I want it to kind of glow a little bit more, you know, with some, maybe some temperature. I'll put a little bit underneath the pier. In these windows right here, I usually have them really light so that it kind of reflects some of the colors. Let's put a little bit of blue, like it's reflecting, you know, some of the colors of the water maybe. That. I don't know if it's reflecting it, but it has a tiny little touch of that blue in here. You know, making a connection between the water. Perhaps. Okay, now. All right, let's play around with some other things here. I'm really spending a lot of time on this because I, kind of really want to get somewhat of a good gist of what we can do, or I don't know, kind of the feel of using these pens for this type of process. Okay, I'm grabbing some gel pens in somewhat of the color scheme that I've been working in. These are both Uniball, Signo, and Shuttle art gel pens here. And I want them in colors kind of within the color scheme here. Okay, this is for the trees. And for the grassy area, let's go with something like this, okay? Let's see, here's another one, kind of neon. Let's see what these can do here. Now, there's not a lot of variation that's happening in certain areas in here, so let's go back in and add in, some light, very specific types of marks into these trees and make them look a little bit more dimensional with the use of lighter values. And there's like these little tufts of, foliage in here, and what I'm doing is I'm just kind of putting them on the top sides of it. In the designs themselves, you can see these, in other words, there's these lighter areas on the tree, and I'm just reiterating that with a few dots, so I'm just putting some dots on the darker sides, not on the, the darker one, or did I say on the lighter one? On the lighter top side. It's kind of where light meets dark. So see up here, here, and here. And I'll just continue doing that throughout. So see right there, that's that light area right there. So it doesn't, you can just reference the designs. I've drawn the highlights into the designs, and all you're doing is after coloring it, you're going back in and just redefining, I guess, some of those areas, okay? And it just makes things look a little bit more dimensional as a result. So we darken the shadows and we highlight the lights, the lighter areas. And this is just some kind of pastel orange that I'm applying right now. Okay, that was the orange. That's the same color orange here. Here's kind of this one's a brighter orange right here. It's kind of similar in value. It's a little bit brighter of an ink though. So I'm not going to add a ton of that. Okay, I've kind of established a lot of it with that first color, so I don't need to do so much with every other color after it. So I mentioned this in my other videos, just like those alcohol pens, this set of gel pens is oh, this is a glitter pen right here. This is a glitter orange, but my set of these Shuttle art pens, and one of those was a Signo, but Uniball, but this Shuttle art one is very reasonable at 180 colors for $25, and those 180 colors came with a refill for each one, that little thing. You'd have to kind of match it up and figure out which one's which. But pretty good, and pretty good pens. To hold it in my hand feels somewhat cheap, but I am absolutely fine with that at that price. Okay, this is pastel yellow. Kind of group your little dots, you know, a little bit for a little bit of variation. This yellow stands out pretty good. Sometimes when I'm doing these little dots like this, it's almost like rubber stamp impressionism or something like that, kind of adding these little dots of light. You know, it's almost like paint, right? These gel pen inks to represent light, you know. Alright, now this yellow can be used down here in the grass as well. It's kind of carrying out the same texture as well as color into the scene, you know, in different areas. Let's see what these look like right here, these trees. Yellow areas in there to make it look a little bit more dimensional. Okay, boy, how does the time fly? I've got a gardeners outside doing the neighborhood. Okay, this is green. I'm going to bring in some of this green into my tree. Not too much of it, but just to make that area a little bit more relatable. Let's see, do I have kind of a tan color right here? Here's a tan. I almost can't even see it on white paper, but I just kind of go back in and kind of bring out some of the trunks of this tree again. I can see that, you know, that have been colored, you know, all the various colors that I've used so far in there thing, but I can still see them, so I'm just going back in here and kind of redefining those little branches in here. Okay, kind of the branches of the trees are kind of showing again. I just kind of did a little line up them, where you can see that the highlights on the branches themselves throughout the tree, and I've just kind of reiterated it. So again, it's just a matter of looking. It's not, imagine, kind of thinking about something. You don't have to know something about something in theory or anything like that. You just reference, the designs, and there's highlights and there's shadows in them, and you can just kind of follow that as a lead. There's a reference point. There's a very intense green right here, in terms of like a neon green. Okay, and you can add some of it up into your tree, a few little, the reds and greens and whatnot. Oranges. Okay, let's take a look at some white gel pen work. And I can add this down into my water, my grass, in my cabin area maybe. Okay, you can see my pier shapes are a little bit gone, so let's go and add this back in here. Got a little color of brown in that window right there. This is go in there and kind of get rid of that, or there's these little eaves. Kind of pull out my kind of giving a little bit more dimension to those windows by having a little glare in it. Okay, I got a lawnmower outside. Maybe I'll pause this. Okay, but let's see. Bring out these rocks a little bit more. The highlights on the tops of each rock. And most of the times in my designs, I do give a highlight to each one of those little objects, even no matter how small it is. I'm just going in there and reiterating that. It's getting loud here. Alright, I'll have to pause this. I don't need to worry about ink drying or something like that, so I'm just adding these little highlights. So, pausing this. I don't want to stop though, this is fun. Alright, I'll pause this for a little bit and come back to it. Ah, bummer. Okay, it's not completely safe to start doing this again, but I think they're still have the leaf blowing to go. It's going to get really loud again, but this has been about 15 minutes. One thing about using this medium of alcohol inks, I believe, when you lay it down, what you see is what you get. With dye-based inks, they often dry lighter than what they look like when you apply them, so you may have to make adjustments with that type of medium. But this is just what you see is what you get. I don't think it changed hue, or value rather, from a few minutes ago. It's just that, the alcohol inks dry very quickly, with that type of binder. So there really shouldn't be any kind of surprises. Okay, let's hit some of these rocks down here. The smallest area. A little highlight on them. One thing I'm noticing, I'm wondering if the gel pen, though, became a little bit more translucent. I'm not really sure, with all that alcohol ink. Some of the highlights that I thought I applied on here look a little bit darker. Like there's a little bit of a translucency instead of opacity. Okay, now I'm using white, if I didn't mention that before. And these highlights to the very top surfaces of some of these leaf clusters within the tree. It's a way to go back and reclaim the lightness that we lost through the use of all those saturated tones, layered tones maybe, more than saturated, in these leaf clusters. So it's bringing me the variation that I really wanted, and we kind of created that variation a little bit with using some lighter colors and lifting some of those darker colors off of there, but this is really going back and getting really closer to the the value of the paper, of white paper. If I didn't mention it before, this composition, the initial composition, was from, I believe, one of the stamp sketching videos on the nature set that these stamps are on. The stamps also come a la carte too, but they're also on their own dedicated set. Alright, getting a little loud again. Anyways, we got some variation starting to happen in here. Okay, back in a few minutes. Okay. Kind of going along in the direction of this wood. It just makes things look a little bit more dimensional that way. Okay, now I have a lot of area in my water if I want to add in some kind of little sparkles or something like that, highlights. I think I'm going to stick with the these shapes that were created by the alcohol inks, okay? And I'll highlight some of them. They're very subtle because the water itself is not very, it's not very dark at all. Okay. A little bit more contrast. Yeah, I'm convinced this pen, I don't know if it's like absorbing or something, some of that ink maybe? The alcohol ink? Because it seems like it's more opaque when I apply it, and more translucent after it's set, so it gets darker. Not an entirely bad thing. You can kind of work with. Yeah, see when I apply that down, it's lighter. Maybe I don't know. Maybe whatever's in these gel pens are kind of making the alcohol go back into solution, which would kind of make sense because if you spray these, you have to kind of be careful about the alcohol inks running, and the gel pens do that too. It kind of breaks it down and it kind of goes back into solution a little bit. So that being said, if you spray these, you want to give a kind of a quick just coverage spray and let it dry before you apply more. Okay. Thought we were done with that blower. Okay, I think I'm free to work here. Gets noisy around here sometime. Okay. Hero hues. Unicorn. White. Yeah, he's far enough away. Okay, kind of getting some of this off here, kind of smashing the tip. Just using a cotton swab if you haven't seen me do this before. And applying it into the lighter areas at first, okay? Where you can't really see too much of it. Still too much ink on here. Okay. And kind of oscillating the focus of certain areas. It just reads as kind of like mist or something like that, but I'm not going to be applying it everywhere. Just kind of in areas here and there. I still have too much ink on there. You want to kind of dry brush this into your scene. Otherwise, it applies too much. Okay, but see that softer kind of shoreline, Maybe there's a little bit of a kind of a built-up mist coming off the water over here underneath the pier. It's a little bit more of a richer kind of surface texture scheme that's happening when you do this, because we'll have both kind of sharp and soft elements within the scene. Okay, especially with something like this, we have a lot of bright tones and kind of working with these alcohol pens. There's subtleties, but I don't quite have the same range of color applications that I do with, let's say, dye-based inks, where I can really manipulate it. I did manipulate it through the use of colors here, but with dye-based inks, I can kind of manipulate it with the use of the amount of ink that's been laid down too. But when you're coming straight out of the pen, you're kind of, depending on kind of the actual color and value of the pen itself, rather than using kind of portions of it. So you can kind of see it's kind of softening up here and there. Just putting a little bit of fog around the house. It's not always to set kind of the tone, emotional tone as far as time of day or something like that, but it is just kind of mix it up a little bit. I always say this, in movies you'll often see just at any time of day, out in the woods or something like that, there'll be kind of a fog machine rolling, no matter what time of day, high noon, whatever. If you're a fan of, I don't know, like Twilight movies or something like that. I haven't seen a lot of them, but I think that first one had a lot of probably fog machines used like in the forests and whatnot. The movie Pet Sematary, if you're kind of a fan of horror, we just watched that, and I don't know, there was like fog machines galore used in that one, Okay. Kind of putting it around some of these trees where tree meets the light. It's kind of just making a little bit of a softer edge right in there. See, right around here, it's very, very bright and a little bit harsh, I would say. I can soften up a little bit of it. Don't do it the whole thing. Or I guess you could, but it might look like there's too much of it, But see this right around these trees? I can kind of put some little pigment ink on it, and it kind of softens them up a little bit. It kind of puts them in light. It's saying that there's light kind of hitting, moisture in the air, and it's just kind of illuminating the moisture and kind of breaking up the that light coming back to your eye. And the form isn't so, the objects aren't so intense. They're dull and light. Alright, so let's see this little kayaker down here. If there's kind of fog around the bank there, you're saying that there's fog probably on the water surface, so I'm just kind of putting some of this on there, but not obscuring the whole figure. So it's a little bit more complex in terms of a textural statement. You can see it around the shoreline here. Put a little right here, maybe. A couple taps, you can't really see anything, but it's through the repetitive tapping. This tree down here. through repetitive tapping, it gets a little bit more obscure. You apply a little bit more of that very, very light amount of that ink, okay? It's like dry brushing it on there, and if you brush on too much, you just kind of tap it with your finger, and it'll remove just to the, you know, the degree you want that medium to be on there, to be applied. Okay, it's a little bit lighter right back here. Maybe I'll kind of put a little bit more light in that area, meaning apply a little bit more pigment ink so it's lighter. Pigment ink dries a little bit darker, therefore more translucent than what it looks like when it's been freshly applied, so maybe apply a little bit more than you think you'll need, or that you think looks kind of ideal. Don't be afraid to use more than you think looks good, you know, if you haven't done this before, just to kind of get a feel of what it maybe goes, you know, what going too far looks like. And then you just tap it, and, you know, if it's on glossy paper, it'll come right off. Or you can buff it out completely, too, if you don't like it. Kind of mellows everything out, doesn't it, by having that kind of look in there. So we do have the bright kind of aspects of, you know, these different colors in here, but we've kind of obscured it a touch in various areas. Okay. Okay, I'm using a little bit more throughout here and kind of obscuring that little passage, you know, the more distant that bank is. Okay, I think that is about right. Everything got pretty bright in here, but now I'm just kind of, you know, dulling a lot of it out with this, but we have the richness in there still in various areas, which I think looks good. Maybe there's a little bit of a smoke coming out of this little chimney top, you know. Something like that. Kind of blowing it that way. After a nice kayak ride, or a nice kayak on the lake, or whatever. Coming home. Dinner's on. Alright, let's take a look. I like what I did last time by putting this black piece of paper here. Make that stand out a little bit more. Okay, so experiment, I think number one, using the just alcohol ink pens and a lot of gel pens, that's for sure, in the scene. Talk about using kind of everything I had. in terms of the color scheme with a couple different types of mediums, and alcohol inks in various values of blues, browns, and greens. Spirit of that color scheme. I guess I went into the reds as well. Don't remember which ones exactly. Carrot? Did I use carrot? Not sure. Anyway, a lot of different pens, a lot of different colors, and at the foundation of it, good or bad, I don't know, you know, because I had kind of developed my kind of theory as far as the best ways to approach this medium, but kind of approaching it in the same general concept of dye-based inks, okay, and that's starting light and then working incrementally darker. The one thing that I do differently is I go back to my lighter tones after I've applied the darker ones continuously throughout the entire process, just to kind of blend them out. Otherwise it gets a little bit harsh for me in terms of the application. Not that using brushes, different types of pens, you know, the textures and brush tip marks look bad. They don't, you know, but for me, I'm just not that, I don't know, accomplished at using them. I'm a beginner, in fact, so I'm not going for the brush mark look. Okay, I did it in the water because I thought if I go back and try to smooth that out, I think it would look forced, so I just stayed with these kind of developing things, and then I just went along with it. Here's this kind of stroke in there, and then I went back in with a darker one and kind of stayed in the spirit, you know, that seemed to be developing with that first. I think it was gray. But anyways, I like all these different textures that can be achieved. I'm a big fan of texture, and I like the different textures that can be achieved with that kind of alcohol ink separation look, and you can see it down in all these areas. It becomes a little bit more obscured with the gel pen work, especially like in the trees, but you can kind of see it down here on the banks where there's darker tones, okay, in the shadows right in here. You can kind of see that alcohol ink look and texture from it. So anyways, I think everything has been kind of equally treated as far as the finish of these. Okay, the cabin, you know, has about 3 or 4 layers of different types of browns or pale oranges in the scene, and that the lightest of colors of the brown has been used in the green, and the green has been used in the trees as well. And I think I used some of the, you know, the grays and blues from throughout this area in my grassy areas. So there's a little bit more of a continuity of as far as the color scheme goes when you do something like that, and things don't look just so separate than as if we were just to use only green for the green areas and reds and oranges and yellows for the trees, and then blue for this area right here. So you have a little bit of element crossing over into all of the different objects within the scene. And then gel pen textures kind of bring it all together as well. And then we have that pigment ink kind of texture kind of overlaid over everything. And that kind of gives it a little bit more of a kind of a cohesion. So anyways, fun stuff. I really enjoy kind of experimenting and seeing what can be done with different types of media. I need to do it more often. And I definitely need to investigate this medium more and kind of refamiliarize myself with alcohol inks and just pens in general. Oh, I keep forgetting. I don't know if it would really make a difference, but on this scene, but using things like colored pencil, you know, you can kind of come into some areas. I don't know, this one's, if I sharpen this you might be able to see a little bit more of it, but you can use things like colored pencil. It doesn't really apply or transfer to the paper very easily. I mean, it depends on which color you're using too. I think some are a little bit softer than others, but maybe we'll do that on a matte piece of paper sometime with the colored pencils and chalks and pastels or something of that sort. Okay, but anyways, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for tuning into the channel.